the Mediterranean sun cast long shadows across the terrace of the Monte Carlo Beach Club as a young man in his early 20s raised another glass of champagne, surrounded by models, heirs, and the perpetually beautiful people who orbit European royalty like moths to a flame. This was Andrea Casiraghi in his element, or so the tabloids would have the world believe. But the truth about Monaco's party prince is far more complex than the sensational headlines that followed him through the first decade of the millennium, a narrative woven with privilege and duty, rebellion and redemption, scandal and surprising substance. Born late in the evening of June 8, 1984, at Princess Grace Hospital Center in La Colle, Monaco, named for his legendary grandmother, Andrea Albert Pierre Casiraghi arrived into a world of unimaginable wealth and equally unbearable scrutiny. He was named after his father's childhood friend, his maternal uncle Prince Albert, and his maternal great-grandfather Prince Pierre, Duke of Valentinois. From his first breath, Andrea carried the weight of expectation, second in line to the Monegasque throne, heir to one of Europe's most glamorous dynasties, and living embodiment of a fairy tale that had captivated the world when his American actress grandmother married Prince Rainier III in 1956. The early years seemed almost too perfect, like scenes from a film that couldn't possibly be real. Andrea grew up between the palace in Monaco, the beloved Grimaldi Lodge at Roque-Aiguel in the Maritime Alps, and the family's properties in France and Italy. He had everything a child could want: private beaches, yacht excursions, ski chalets in the Alps. His godparents were his maternal aunt Princess Stéphanie and his paternal uncle, Marco Casiraghi, cementing his position at the very heart of European aristocracy. But this gilded childhood shattered violently on October 3, 1990, when Andrea was only 6 years old. His father Stefano Casiraghi, the dashing Italian industrialist and world champion offshore speedboat racer, died in a catastrophic accident that would haunt Andrea for decades. The 42-foot catamaran Pinot di Pinot flipped while traveling at approximately 150 kilometers per hour in 3 to 4 foot wave conditions during the World Championship race off Monaco's coast. Stefano and his co-pilot Patrice Innocenti had stopped earlier in the race to rescue another competitor whose vessel had caught fire, an act of heroism that would cost Stefano precious time and, ultimately, his life. Experts who studied the accident concluded that Casiraghi would most likely have survived had the boat been equipped with a full canopy. The tragedy led to sweeping safety reforms in powerboat racing, but for 6-year-old Andrea, it meant something far more personal and devastating. Princess Caroline did not know how to tell her children that their father had died, so her father, Prince Rainier, did so. The moment is almost impossible to imagine, a grieving grandfather having to explain to his eldest grandchild that the father he adored, the man who had been teaching him to ski and ride horses, would never come home. The tragedy thrust young Andrea into a role he was too young to understand, the man of the family, the eldest son who must now carry forward a legacy written in grief. Stefano's funeral was held in Monaco's Cathedral of St. Nicholas, 8 years after Princess Grace's funeral in the same place, a reminder that tragedy had become an unwelcome companion to the Grimaldi family. Princess Caroline, devastated but determined, made a decision that would define Andrea's childhood. To protect her children from excessive media attention, Caroline moved to Saint-Rémy-de-Provence and later to Paris. It was a bold move for a princess, abandoning the palace for the French countryside, trading tiaras for privacy. Andrea grew up on his family's French country estate in Saint-Rémy-de-Provence, along with his siblings Charlotte and Pierre. This simple upbringing was a far cry from the glamour of Monaco, where his grandfather Rainier reigned. Yet even tragedy couldn't completely shield Andrea from the peculiar burdens of his heritage. There was the delicate matter of his legitimacy. Despite his parents not having married in the church, as required for legitimacy under church law, he and his younger sister and brother were legitimized by Pope John Paul II in February 1993, 8 months after his mother was granted an annulment of her first marriage to Philippe Junot by a pope's decree in June 1992, making him and his siblings dynasts and clearing the way for their possible succession to the throne of Monaco. It was a complex ecclesiastical dance that even as a child, Andrea would have understood signaled his unusual position in the world, simultaneously privileged beyond measure and subject to rules that applied to almost no one else. The family dynamic shifted again in 1999 when Andrea was 15. His mother married Ernst August, Prince of Hanover, and gave birth to Princess Alexandra of Hanover. Besides a half-sister, Casiraghi gained two stepbrothers, Ernst August, hereditary Prince of Hanover, and Prince Christian of Hanover, through his mother's remarriage. Andrea now had to navigate not just the grief of losing his father, but the complex emotions of watching his mother build a new family. But 1999 brought something else entirely unexpected: global fame of a very particular kind. In 1999, he was included in the People magazine's 50 Most Beautiful People list. He was only 15 years old. Suddenly, Andrea wasn't just a prince. He was a teenage heartthrob, his face plastered across magazines worldwide. The recognition was both a blessing and a curse. It cemented his status as one of Europe's most eligible young men, but it also ensured that his every move would be documented, analyzed, scrutinized. Andrea attended the prestigious International School of Paris, where he wasn't just another student, but the subject of intense fascination. Caroline sent her children to school in Paris, where Andrea shone for his skills as a skier, horse rider, footballer, and long-distance runner. He earned his international baccalaureate in December 2002 from the International School of Paris, where his mother gave the commencement speech in June the following year. A bittersweet moment that must have reminded Andrea of the father who wasn't there to see him graduate. His education became a grand tour of prestigious institutions. Following a period at McGill University in Montreal, Quebec, Canada, he eventually graduated in 2006 with a BA degree in Visual Arts and International Politics from the American University of Paris. He later earned a master's degree in International Affairs from the New School in New York, and in 2014 began an MBA at IE Business School in Madrid. Each institution represented not just education, but escape, a chance to be something more than just Princess Caroline's son or Grace Kelly's grandson. It was during his Paris years, roughly from 2002 to 2008, that Andrea earned his notorious reputation. The City of Lights became his playground, and he proved an exceptionally dedicated student of its pleasures. The French capital's nightlife became his second education, and paparazzi captured him emerging from Les Bains Douches, the legendary nightclub where Paris's elite mingled with artists and celebrities. He was photographed at Castel, at Fashion Week after-parties, at private soirees in the Marais. Always impeccably dressed in that effortlessly disheveled way that only the truly wealthy can achieve, Andrea became a tabloid fixture. In 2003, he was featured in a Town and Country article about young royals and was voted the most stylish male royal by Hello magazine's readers. He even surpassed Prince William, ranking first in a poll by the British magazine Hello, which elected him the most elegant royale. The comparisons to Prince William were inevitable. Both were young, handsome, connected to tragic mother figures, and navigating the impossible balance between duty and normalcy. But where William had the British press and an eventual clear path to kingship, Andrea existed in a stranger liminal space. The media nicknamed him as Enfant Terrible and the Rebel Angel. The moniker Party Prince stuck like expensive cologne, amplified by Forbes magazine, which in 2008 placed him among the 10 most fascinating young royals in the world. But unlike some of his royal counterparts, whose scandals involved drugs, violence, or genuine debauchery, Andrea's transgressions were almost quaint: drinking champagne, dancing until dawn, dating beautiful women. The most controversial photographs showed him smoking cigarettes outside clubs or looking exhausted after all-night parties. Then came the incident that briefly threatened his carefully cultivated image. In December 2011, Casiraghi's driving license was suspended after being caught driving at 200 kilometers per hour near Lyon, France, an incident that briefly attracted tabloid attention. 200 kilometers per hour on a French highway. It was reckless, dangerous, and perhaps unconsciously echoing his father's own need for speed. The incident earned him renewed enfant terrible headlines, but by then, Andrea was already in the midst of a transformation. The romantic escapades had provided endless fodder for magazines over the years. Andrea was linked to German socialite Caroline von Stauffenberg and Spanish actress Maria Jurado. Each relationship was dissected, analyzed, photographed. The pressure was immense. Whoever he chose wouldn't just be his girlfriend, but potentially the future princess consort of Monaco. Every date carried dynastic implications. But in 2004, everything changed when his younger sister Charlotte introduced him to one of her classmates, a member of Colombian aristocracy who would transform his life. Tatiana Santo Domingo attended the International School of Geneva and then enrolled at a boarding school in Fontainebleau, near Paris, where she was reported to have met Andrea. She was different from the socialites and models he'd been photographed with, a Colombian-American heiress to a brewing fortune, educated at Institut La Rosey, the legendary School of Kings in Switzerland, and later at the American University in London, where she earned her BFA in Visual Communications with a concentration in photography in 2005. Her grandfather was owner of the Santo Domingo Group and the Colombian Bavaria Brewery, which was one of the largest breweries in South America. When he died in 2011, he left a sixth of his wealth to Tatiana Santo Domingo. Tatiana had her own money, her own identity, her own ambitions as a fashion entrepreneur who would go on to co-found Muzungu Sisters, an ethical fashion brand, in 2011. She wasn't looking to become a princess. She was looking for an equal partner. Their relationship unfolded gradually, mostly away from cameras. She cites Loulou de la Falaise as her style idol, and her bohemian aesthetic, flowing silhouettes, ethnic prints, artisanal pieces, stood in marked contrast to the traditional elegance expected of Monaco royalty. Andrea seemed to mature overnight, or perhaps he simply found someone who saw him rather than his title. The party appearances decreased dramatically. He began involving himself more seriously in his family's business interests and charitable foundations. Since 2004, Casiraghi has been involved, to varying degrees, with the World Association of Children's Friends, AIM-AD, a philanthropic organization founded in 1963 by his grandmother Grace. It is currently presided over by his mother, Princess Caroline. He spent 8 months teaching children in Senegal, Togo, and Niger. In August 2006, Casiraghi visited Manila on behalf of a joint venture of AIM-AD and the Villani Foundation, where he drew attention to devastating effects caused by toxic waste from abandoned US military bases. It was a side of Andrea the party photos had never captured. Serious, engaged, using his platform for genuine good. Since 2007, he has been the patron of the Motrice Foundation, which funds research into cerebral palsy. This wasn't casual celebrity charity work. Andrea threw himself into fundraising and awareness campaigns across Europe and West Africa. In 2011, Andrea bought a pair of loafers from a Tod's boutique in Milan. This shopping trip was well publicized for a reason. The following summer, he donated them to the Small Steps Project. The Small Steps Project gives celebrity-worn shoes to the poorest children in the world. Even his fashion choices became vehicles for philanthropy. In 2011, tragedy struck the family again when Princess Antoinette, Baroness of Massy, died suddenly. Casiraghi and his siblings, Charlotte and Pierre, hosted Monaco's annual Rose Ball in the absence of Prince Albert, Princess Caroline and Princess Stephanie, who were mourning the sudden death of their aunt. Casiraghi gave the speech at the start of the event. It was a moment that demonstrated how far he'd come. The party prince now stepping up in his family's darkest hour, delivering speeches, shouldering responsibility. By 2012, after 7 years together, Princess Caroline released a statement announcing that her son, Andrea Casiraghi, and Tatiana Santo Domingo had become engaged after a 7-year relationship. But transformation never comes without controversy. On November 6, 2012, Santo Domingo said, in an interview for La Voz Libre, that she was expecting her first child. In March 2013, before the couple married, she gave birth to a son, Alexandre Andrea Stefano Sasha Casiraghi, on 21 March 2013, at Portland Hospital in London, England. The couple wasn't married, and in Monaco, a deeply Catholic principality, this raised eyebrows despite the changing times. Conservative elements question whether this was appropriate behavior for someone so close to the throne. Andrea and Tatiana seemed unbothered by the criticism, and they proceeded with their plans. Casiraghi and Santo Domingo were married in a civil ceremony in the princely palace of Monaco on 31 August 2013. The following February, brought the religious ceremony that Monaco society had been anticipating. A religious ceremony was later held in Gstaad, Switzerland, on the 1st of February 2014. The 11th century church had been transformed into a winter wonderland, adorned with boughs and urns of flowers, some of which came from Paris. Candles added to the magical atmosphere. The bride wore bespoke Valentino haute couture with a glittering tiara, her long dark hair swept into a chignon. Among the 300 guests were actress Uma Thurman and designer Valentino himself. Andrea and Tatiana, who are a notoriously private couple, had made every effort to keep the wedding an intimate affair, and Monegasque police stood guard outside. The controversy illuminated something essential about Andrea's position. He occupies a strange liminal space in the aristocratic hierarchy. When Prince Rainier died in 2005 and Prince Albert took the throne, Andrea was second in line after his mother. Reports even suggested that Rainier once considered cutting Albert out of the line of succession to favor his grandson. The late prince's hope was, apparently, to pass the throne on to Caroline upon his death. Caroline would then be expected to abdicate immediately, hence handing power to Andrea. The plan was never implemented, but it reveals how seriously Andrea was once considered as Monaco's future. Then, in 2014, everything changed again. Prince Albert's twins, Jacques and Gabriella, were born, legitimate heirs to the throne. Andrea dropped from second in line to fourth, behind his twin cousins and his mother. The shift liberated him from the highest level of scrutiny, while also raising existential questions. If he's no longer likely to rule, what is his purpose? How does he justify the privileges he enjoys? Andrea and Tatiana have since built a life that defies easy categorization. Their second child, a daughter named India Julia, was born in London on the 12th of April 2015. Their third child, a boy named Maximilien Rainier, was born in Monaco on the 19th of April 2018. In 2017, the family even became faces of Christian Dior, with Tatiana and the children posing for the Baby Dior collection, a connection honoring Princess Grace, who had inaugurated Dior's first children's boutique in Paris 50 years earlier. Casiraghi is fluent in French, Italian, Spanish, English, and German, a polyglot prince moving seamlessly between worlds. His hobbies and interests include reading, football, horse riding, water sports, skiing, and collecting Swatch watches. The Swatch detail is somehow perfect, a man who could afford any timepiece in the world, choosing to collect the Swiss brand known for democratic design. Since January 2012, he has served as brigadier in the Compagnie des Carabiniers du Prince, Monaco's ceremonial military unit, a largely symbolic role, but one he takes seriously. He was an intern at the embassy from Qatar to Monaco, which, like most of Monaco's embassies, is based in Paris, attempting to develop genuine diplomatic expertise. His business ventures reveal a man trying to forge his own path. He serves on the board of the Monaco Yacht Club and involves himself in various family enterprises, particularly in real estate development. The most surprising aspect of Andrea's evolution has been his apparent comfort with domesticity. Photographs show him at school functions, on family vacations, pushing strollers through Monaco, the kinds of mundane parental activities that seem incongruous with his earlier reputation. He appears at official royal functions when required, always impeccably dressed, always appropriately serious, but the restless energy that characterized his 20s has been channeled into family life and serious pursuits. He regularly attends major princely events, like National Day celebrations and the Monaco Grand Prix, but these appearances feel dutiful rather than defining. Andrea's estimated net worth of approximately $9.8 million, modest by billionaire standards, but still representing generational wealth, reflects his family inheritances and stewardship of philanthropic ventures. His wealth is largely managed through private family assets and investments, augmented by his roles in international foundations and business education. But numbers can't capture the complexity of inherited privilege or the weight of being born into a position where your value is predetermined. Looking back at those paparazzi photographs from the mid-2000s, Andrea emerging from nightclubs with tousled hair and tired eyes, it's tempting to see them as evidence of wasted privilege or aristocratic excess. But perhaps they show something else. A young man, temporarily lost in the maze of his own good fortune, trying to find exit routes through champagne and dawn. The partying wasn't rebellion, it was research, an attempt to feel something real in a life carefully curated by history and expectation. The party prince narrative, always somewhat exaggerated, now seems like ancient history. At 41, Andrea has evolved into something more nuanced, a man born into extraordinary circumstances who has managed to create something resembling a normal life without completely abandoning his responsibilities. He hasn't revolutionized Monaco or become a crusading reformer. He hasn't disgraced himself or brought scandal to the family name beyond a speeding ticket and some youthful excess. Instead, he's done something perhaps more difficult. He's found a middle path between duty and authenticity, between privilege and purpose. The question of what Andrea represents remains complex. Is he a reformed playboy, a prince who found his purpose, or simply a man who grew up, as most of us do, but under the unforgiving glare of international attention? Perhaps the answer is all of these things at once. Andrea Casiraghi is neither the fairy tale nor the cautionary tale. He's something more interesting and more human. Someone who happened to be born into extraordinary circumstances and who has spent 4 decades figuring out what that means. His story reflects the broader challenges facing European royalty in the 21st century. Monaco itself is almost an anachronism, a 2-square-kilometer principality sustained by banking, tourism, and mystique, rather than actual political power. What does it mean to be a prince when the principality is smaller than many farms? What responsibilities come with unearned privilege in an era increasingly skeptical of inherited advantage? Andrea doesn't have easy answers, but his life suggests he's genuinely wrestling with the questions. Today, Andrea divides his time between Monaco, Paris, and London with Tatiana and their 3 children. He attends charitable galas, participates in environmental causes, particularly ocean conservation, appropriate for someone whose father died at sea and whose principality depends on the Mediterranean, and maintains the careful balance between public duty and private life. He's no longer the teen heartthrob on People magazine's most beautiful list, or the party prince emerging from Parisian nightclubs. He's a husband, a father, a philanthropist, a businessman, roles that lack the glamour of his youth but perhaps offer more substance. The Mediterranean sun still shines on Monaco, still casts long shadows across the same terraces where Andrea once raised champagne glasses with abandon. But the man standing in that light has changed, shaped by loss, love, fatherhood, and the slow accumulation of years into something his younger self might not recognize, but would, perhaps, ultimately respect. He carries the weight of being Princess Grace's grandson, of being 4th in line to a miniature throne, of representing a way of life that many consider obsolete. Yet he carries it with a grace that suggests he's made peace with the contradictions. The party prince grew up, had children, found love, and discovered that the most radical act available to someone born with everything might simply be choosing to be decent, present, and real. His story isn't finished, none of our stories are. But the trajectory suggests a man who has learned that privilege without purpose is empty, that titles without meaning are worthless, and that the true measure of a life isn't what you're born with, but what you do with it. In the end, Andrea Casiraghi's greatest achievement might be the simplest, becoming fully human despite every incentive to remain merely royal.